Jerry Gidel is back to Connected Farmer to talk about the USDA numbers, the corn and soybean markets bouncing back, and yet his estimates for U.S. corn and soybean stocks right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, before we jump into the stocks, I would like to speak about this week, how it started with the USDA numbers on Tuesday.
Yes, Tuesday's numbers. Uh, there was a little optimism that maybe the USDA was going to tighten up their carryover stock, particularly in soybeans, maybe just a little bit on corn. Maybe they're going to end up maybe pop up exports just a little bit. Uh, Actually, the stocks numbers that we had back on March 31st kind of suggested maybe that the feed usage was maybe a little stronger on corn, and that's not totally out of question. It's because the fact we have so limited competition this year for corn, and the wheat numbers in that quarterly stock suggested we had less feeding numbers of wheat than we previous thought. And then you talk about alternatives, sorghum, oats and barley, all that kind of stuff. Even so, that's but unfortunately, the USDA, at least in my point of view, decided that they wanted to sit back and wait and see what the early 2023-24 statistics look like from there, and get a little better handle on things on the corn. Soybeans, a little tougher to sit back and wait there. That number originally it was like 57 million before the trade numbers, but we did find out in some of the statistics that the exports on census were a little higher than expected, but still 35 million under expectations. And that's kind of what I thought maybe the USDA would kind of reflect back here on things. And it's kind of interesting this time of year to get a stocks number that is lower uh, than uh, than expected and reflected without looking at your because actually a smaller crop out there. You have to increase residual. They were like 18, and so I kind of threw mine up 32, but it didn't. They decided not to get involved with that and wait. We'll see if that's the right approach. I guess I'm myself and others, and it kind of reflected in how the bean market has reacted here since that report has been out. Not so much today, but Wednesday and Thursday they hung right in there, and also there was some additional numbers from South America that help add to the uncertainty of how much our carryover stock could be, because we could still have some pretty strong late season soybean exports because of that. Here we go, though. Yesterday afternoon, this is twists and turns of what goes on in the soybean market. We get a report from Bloomberg that a 30,000 ton cargo from Santorini, and I actually have been in that port on the Amazon a long time ago, approaching 1995, 96, and that they were just getting started up there on that particular export facility. And but because of the fact that this year's crop in Brazil has turned out to be 25-30 million over previous estimate, or excuse me, previous years, and that all of a sudden the producers out there just don't have places to store soybeans, so they've been basically willing to sell things pretty aggressively. So the basis levels in Brazil have been very low comparison to what they traditionally are. And so it looks like that our friends in Wilmington, North Carolina, decided it was just too good of a deal here to not take a look at maybe taking a cargo of 30,000 tons up to Wilmington. And they're alluding to the fact that that could be the U.S. Poultry producer Purdue that was interested in making that purchase. So there you go. The soybeans are really an up and down scenario, but the corn and wheat here really ended on a positive note, possibly because of the technicals too. We got above the 200-day moving average, in the corn and wheat. Finally, I think started to realize that there really wasn't going to be a lot of rain in the Southwest U.S., and so that crop particularly could be under the gun.
Yes, so over the week, some different estimates have increased the output for the Brazilian crop. So how do you think that's impacting the market? And also, how did the report change your estimates?
Well, the USDA moved their estimate up from 152 to 153. Yes, we've had Sassafras Mercado. We had some other ones that popped up their number into the 155, 150. I'm not sure it's 156. That's an interesting one at this point. The corn side of the numbers, actually, the USDA was unchanged, and so far, at least, there seems to be a solid number here. This 125, 126 number metric tons on Brazilian corn, but the dryness that has impacted Argentina and that has kept has also impacted Mato Grosso do Sul, and so that's kind of it's slowed down some of the numbers up there on the corn side from there. Because at this point, if the two crops, and we're not still into the second crop safrinha corn here in South America, but I think it's kind of a backdrop of why these soybeans continue to move at pretty interesting levels here on basis from there. Soybeans are not a crop you can really put on the ground. If you get any rain on those soybeans, they just swell up and you really just don't have anything. Corn's a little more forgiving. You might lose 5 or 5 inches of a pound or a pile, I should say, but it's you can salvage a heck of a lot better putting that on the ground than you can beans. You just don't. It's not a very logical thing to do with soybeans from there. So that's part of it. But let's not forget about Argentina. Boy, the Rosario took its number down from 25 down to 23 on beans, and on the corn side, they also took it down. I think it was 33 on that one from there. So in general, the South American crop sizes here on things are, 32. I'm sorry, 35 to 32 on that. And then today of Argentina's other exchange, Buenos Aires, really pointed out the fact that the amount of harvested acres down in Brazil is continued to be under major threat at this point. So that suggests that, considering the kind of prices, even on a bushel of beans here, even if you just take a quick figure of $12 or $13 US, even if you're getting 10 bushels, there you go, 10 times 12, you get $120. But you got to suggest that really means that there's limited yields out there if they're looking at not going ahead and harvested soybeans in some major areas of Argentina.
Yeah, so what's your outlook for corn and soybean prices given all this context?
Well, that's boiling this all down at this point. We've got this little rain event that's coming through here. It's not going to come as fast as some expected, but it looks like it's really going to pick up eastern Nebraska, western Iowa, but it's really not going to help at all the wheat areas of the country, and going to be cool next week. But they're talking about the temperatures rebounding here in the Midwest at this point. So right now, at least, I think the markets are. I still think that there's a lot of tightness out there, and the world. Well, that's a good example of right here in corn. We had another last 2 days. We had a 437 200,000 ton purchase of corn from our old friends, the Chinese, from there. And they also bought about, I think it was about 260,000 tons of new crop. And that's the first time they've done that in this scenario. So I kind of feel like that the corn still has a pop up around that 675 to maybe 680 zone on things. I kind of feel like that this market could be wildly explosive if the wheat market in the U.S. really starts to know its size. But right now, there seems to be a real reluctance of the trade to embrace the idea that we might have less harvested acres in wheat, we might have less yields on the hard red. Now, definitely there's a good looking or good potential, I should say, for a good crop in soft red, which is the wheat that's here east of the Mississippi. And the Pacific Northwest, Washington's a little shaggy, but I think Idaho and Oregon are all right. So, but that's an interesting one. And then, wow, what a backdrop we got going in the Black Sea here. We continue to see the issues of Russia continuing to demand that all the financial sanctions, the lack of access to the SWIFT banking system, anything involving cargo insurance, things like that, should be dropped because we're not going to keep the Black Sea corridor open. We're not going to redo it on May 18th, and at the same time, the previous shipping lanes by rail through the Eastern Europe, I should say, is really getting complicated. A lot of disgruntled Eastern European countries are thinking that anything that's been shipped into their country, and probably some of it has not moved on. And if it hasn't moved on, that's a disappointing, because that does by moving it out of Ukraine, it's fine, but you have to move it into the export channels, and I'm not sure as much of that's happened. And so all of a sudden, we could have the zero type of movement out of wheat into the world market from Ukraine, and that really would change things around, particularly if the U.S. situation in wheat turned a little bit down. So this market is trying to look out in front of itself here on the wheat and corn. I think that's part of the reason for today's kind of firmness here about those issues on things, because of the issues of Ukraine potentially not being able to ship corn and wheat, which is their primary things that they're involved in at this point. From there, so so we're in a situation where the market is going to be very, very sensitive to anything happening about problems in the Black Sea and ongoing issues both here in the U.S. and Brazil about any type of yield reports or reduced output in both those areas here for wheat. And to some extent, it's very hard for me to get excited that people in the plains are going to fire up and if they just potentially maybe wrote off a crop of wheat, that they're going to go out there and spend a lot of money on corn to put it in the ground, because that's even more expensive. And on top of it, it's a crop that demands more moisture than wheat, barley, sorghum, all kinds of different crops other than corn in the current situation. So the weather forecasters around the world will still be highly important as we go into late this April and early May.
All right. We'll see you and talk more about that next week. Thank you, Jerry.
You bet. You have a good weekend. I'm going to be out scouting a little bit of the west of Chicago here, going out to a meeting in Omaha. And that's so I'll get a feel how many people are out in the field. On the first part of the trip, I'm going to be kind of following a little bit of a rainstorm, but we'll see what happens here. I think there'll be some activity. I'm not sure it's going to be wildly jump in plantings this week. We only had a 1% one last week. I'd say right now on corn, we might be another 7 or 8 up. We're not going to, I don't think we'll be above 10%, but we'll see. I will get a firsthand look when I drive out early this coming week.
All right. Thank you very much.